Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Seal-Okanagan First Nation, where I gratefully live rurally, intergenerationally, as animistically, and as collapse-aware as I can. And I'm just a short drive away from a small town known as Summerland, BC. I said a couple episodes ago that I'm on a reduced publishing schedule for the podcast, and I am, even though I'm putting out a couple more here. I just have a couple more, and then I'll take a little break for the season. I'm on this reduced publishing schedule these days, partly because it's our first spring on the farm, Falder Farm, and there are just tons of projects to get on track since we are basically like season 1, episode 1 of regenerative agriculture program. But also life is just really, really hard for me right now. I've experienced some pretty acute loss and this persistent sense of displacement I can't seem to shake off, and some pretty intense worry on the parenting front. And I guess, I've been here 6 months continuously now, and I'm noticing some, I guess now I would call them some troubling changes in my thinking patterns that, like, if a client of mine were sharing them, I'd say they were like potentially signs of, to be clear, a very reasonable and situational, but legitimate depression that nonetheless, in spite of its validity and in spite of the context making a lot of sense, it still needs more acknowledgement and treatment than it's getting. So that's going to take some time and energy. But I also wanted to let you know that I have some good stuff on the go. One of it, which is a still super secret publishing project that I'm currently in talks and early stages of collaboration around. So I can only tease you with that right now. But just know that I'm like dying to announce it soon. I'm just waiting to hear back from Thea Anderson, friend of the podcast, special guest of episode 201, The Magic of Mercury, which was part of the Astro Magic mini-series. Thea is an electional astrologer. She's also a writer and editor, and she's chief of staff for Chani Nicholas Inc. So lots of you know, we're big Chani fans around here. Check my app every day. So I'm super lucky and grateful to have Thea doing the electional astrology for this project. So I'm waiting for her go ahead for the perfect timing of this big, huge, exciting announcement. And actually, at the end of this episode, I'm going to go on like a little bit of a rant, to be honest. Okay, actually, to be honest, at the end of this episode, it's going to be a full-on rant, but it's peripherally related to this super secret, big, exciting announcement about like intentions and impact. Anyway, if you're in the mood to hear me like tear a strip off a stranger on the internet, and but in the service of like offering a little perspective on how patriarchy gets us to cast each other and cast each other's life work and offerings as just like commodities we buy to self-soothe, or cast people as objects that we can rate according to how much they please us, rather than like real life humans who are actually just little mammals expressing ourselves, trying to survive late stage capitalism with all the other stuff going on. Anyway, I'm going to save the rant for later. It's a little coda at the end of this episode. But I feel a lot of passion about it because I have this other big, super secret, exciting thing that I want to share. And like these things, they influence each other. So after the main presentation, which this episode is also in many ways related to, because today's show is about art and artistry and surviving as an artist. All of these things, I hope you can follow the through line, the thread here of my little update, the announcement, today's topic, and then why I am like having a little rant at the end. Okay. For now, just know that there are also good things in the works, and I will keep a slow drip of new episodes coming just for a couple weeks here. And then I'm on summer hiatus. I don't know when the announcement is going to come, if it's going to come before or after the summer hiatus. I got to wait and hear from Thea. Okay, now let's turn attention to today's special guest. Today, we're speaking with my colleague and my friend, Marisa Sullivan. Marisa became a member of the Numinous Network a few years ago, and then over a year ago, I guess, I asked her to guide a monthly intuitive movement session that we offer in the network called Soft Animals. And then one of the cool things about the network is that our guides are members too, right? So you'll often see them participate as members in their favorite sessions. So over time, I had come to learn more and more about Marisa's background and cool experiences and just like really wanted to share them with the network, but also beyond because she's just such a deep well of resources and knowledge and information. And she presences a lot of strength and warmth and wisdom and deep experience. So honestly, I also just love her realness. She has an honesty that I guess comes from the soul of an artist. That's, I think, one of the signature qualities of a true artist, I think, is that raw ability to look at and collaborate with and engage with and try to channel truth. Marisa is a sexual empowerment and intimacy educator and an embodiment and movement facilitator. She's interested in the intersection of sexual pleasure and sexual health and the life journey and the harmful effects of white capitalist colonialism, patriarchy on our bodies, our pleasure, our relationships, and sex. She counsels how to maximize the magic and medicine of sexual juiciness, how to be authentic in our sexual expression, inhabiting our yes and no, and understanding the power of pleasure, not just in sexuality, but joy and pleasure in our bodies and everyday life. Her certifications include multiple yoga systems, pelvic floor yoga, Reiki, womb and perineal steaming, the wheel of consent, as well as training in psychodrama, breathwork for trance, and a master's in theater for educational and therapeutic use. She's also the mother of a teen. She lives with multiple chronic illnesses and is queer. I'm totally delighted that Marisa was willing to come on the show for a little gab session. This is a great episode, I think, to listen to if you're just in the mood for a girlfriend lunch or you want to like put on a little mini documentary while you're cleaning the house. You know, if you're in the mood for a story that strongly evokes a certain, I don't know, specific times and places, I think this one's for you. So, Marisa, what identities do you lead with?
Um, I I'm a pleasure activist. I like that term that Adrienne Murray Brown came up with, and I do feel like I am. I am a pleasure. I live by the code of pleasure in some kind of way. A pleasure, but not a seeker sounds bad, so I like pleasure activist. Um, you got me thinking. So I like that when you talk about being an animist, like, am I an animist? But I'm somebody, it's not quite that. I feel like I'm someone who's living with multiple realms at the same time.
Mm.
And yeah, that I'm just aware and I could be in a slightly different realm at the same time. I'm not just here in the
Mm.
physical realm.
Mm-hmm. That sounds a little
Uh,
shamanistic.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Um, I did write these down.
Yeah.
I think
Mm.
an outsider, and that again is like, oh, that's what I am. I've always feel like I'm a little bit outside the main circle
Mm.
of any circle and kind of society or
Mhm.
what we're doing here. I'm kind of
Mhm.
just on the outside a lot. And I am white. I don't lead with it. I'm aware of my whiteness. I come from Irish and Sicilian heritages that are pretty strong, very Boston, Massachusetts, Catholic. Um, it's a very common Boston mix. I also there is a thread of North African in my family, and one of my aunts is really presents more, and you can see it in certain people. So I feel like it's important. I've been more conscious of it and more claim aware of it. Um, and a mother of a teen who's moving out of the nest and still in the nest, and yeah, daughter, very much. And right now, I would I I identify as being liminal. Like I really feel like I'm in this space of a pause for the next thing. There's like
Mm,
a liminalness in the passing of my father, in the sending off of my daughter, in holding my mother right now, and my brother the way I
mhm,
am with my family. A lot of my life feels very liminal right now.
mhm,
And that
mhm,
felt really nice to get in touch with
mhm,
and to name.
mhm. With the fairly recent passing of your father, I've felt really privileged to learn a bit more about your childhood and your early years as a young adult and in Japan. And I have found it really fascinating. So I feel like this interview, more than most interviews, is me just being nosy. Like, tell me more. But I feel like your story is very cinematic and I do get a like kind of gritty 70s, 80s independent film kind of quality from learning more about your experiences. And so all the identities you shared make sense to me in terms of like how that outsider status or that feeling kind of
Mhm,
shows up in many places and the liminal
mhm,
multidimensional kind of quality. It's kind of gritty, it's kind of arty, it's very street, if I can put it that way. Like it's like you're
uh-huh.
from the neighborhood, wherever that is, whether it's like Boston, Brooklyn, New York. It's very like, yeah, as a like West Coast Canadian, it's almost a stereotype of like an art house
I know.
person from
Yeah,
from a
yeah,
certain era. And like even
yeah.
I see the coloring of what TV was like in the 70s. Like that's how I think about your life, Marisa. So
Uh-huh.
so tell us a little bit about growing up with art and artists all around you. And I'll start with just like a very basic question. Like, would you say you had a happy childhood?
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Um, I would say yes, yes. I had a happy childhood, and there was a lot of insanity and a lot of it wasn't always safe. It wasn't safe in a lot of ways. Um, it was pretty nutty, and it was really cool. It was really, really, really cool and really fun. I mean, talk about that outsider thing. Definitely I have this, my dad was wearing some crazy cape thing, and we lived right in the center of town. You just walk just up the hill past the fire and the fire department and the friendlies, and then you're in the center of town. And somebody said, "Oh, look, it's the artist and his daughter." And they told me, like they heard someone say that. Like we were in this very upper class, very, very, very white town of Andover outside of Boston, and we were very unusual. And
And like, what year would that have been approximately? Oh, there goes the artist and his daughter.
here goes the artist and his daughter. Um, and I used to pose for him. Yeah. And
What year is this?
70s, late
Yeah,
70s, the late
yeah.
70s, mid 70s, mid
Hmm.
70s. Yeah. And that idea of like the liminal and the outsider, like one of the things that was so cool is that I really learned that there are absolutely multiple dimensions and millions of ways of living in this world.
Mm.
Like we lived in this very cookie cutter town, so defined. And what I was able to experience going into Boston and seeing my parents were really into jazz at a certain point. So I got to see the most amazing jazz people so that would be in the 80s. And Boston happened to have this huge music scene, jazz scene. So I saw Abby Lincoln perform and the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and we became friendly with some people. The kind of art I would experience, really crazy theater. We would show up at film festivals, and um, and then my parents had a loft in New York City, and so that was in the 80s. So they had a loft in New York City that these two men, this gay couple, had it from Monday to Thursday. Another person had it 2 weekends a month. Somebody else had it one weekend, and we had it one weekend a month. This loft in Tribeca. And
Okay, again, so cinematic, so almost a
so,
stereotype of like the 80s. Wall Street's over here. Tribeca's just still an artsy kind of like, wow.
and dangerous and wild and
Yeah.
scary. And we would
Yeah.
spend, so in high school, I spent 1 weekend a month going to New York City, and we would just run. We would like literally run from one artistic activity to another. And we could end up at the end of the night at Danceteria, going to a nightclub or some experimental film. We would go from this museum to that museum to these art galleries, all sorts of things. Yeah. And then
Wow.
vacations. My brother joked. And my brother was so funny. His speech at my dad's funeral was really amazing. And he said, we didn't go to Disney World on vacation. We needed our relatives to take us. We would sneak onto other people's Disney vacations. We would sneak with other people to do normal kid stuff. So for our vacation, we toured the burial mounds along the Mississippi of the First Nations people. That
Wow.
was a big vacation, was looking at the mound builders places.
Wow.
So then I was, oh, there's this world.
Hmm.
There's
I mean,
all
you've
these worlds.
already talked about things. You've said like the friendlies. I don't know who that is. The esoteria. I don't know what that is. If I wasn't a pretty adept spiritual seeker, I might not know that there were indigenous burial mounds, like large earthworks in from Ohio and down the Mississippi. I you have a very cultured and like sort of broadly exposed kind of psyche, so I can see how you feel liminal, right? So how
Yeah.
did you end up in Japan?
Yeah. But can I just do like just the
Yeah,
switch
sure.
side of that childhood? And so while we did all these very expansive things, they also did everything on a shoestring.
Right.
So we would go somewhere and run out of money and have to call people and ask if we could come and stay over their house and have dinner with them.
Oh my gosh.
And the lights were always getting turned off. Like one time, everything was turned off, like getting ready for school, and like the water, the electricity, the phone, like everything. And, you sort
Oh,
of wake up and like, Mom, the electricity's off, you know.
oh,
So they just lived really on the edge on so many ways, but one of the ways was like really financially on the edge that they would spend for adventure, but then not have things settled and
right.
together in that
That must
way.
have been really hard as a small person because on the one hand it's normal in your life and so you develop a tolerance for things that like other people would find really distressing, so like okay, that's good, that's a good maybe collapse skill, but on the other hand,
Mhm.
how do you relate to other kids and stuff?
Yeah, yeah. And just that feeling of just like not feeling safe, really, like just like, yeah. And A little bit of shame. Yeah, you could have shame. And then again, there was this other side that was like exciting, you know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
wonderful. And yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
also crappy. Like, oh no. Like I guess I imagine that it's like, oh, well, my parents will figure it out because they always figure it out, but it's still a like very insecure feeling to
yeah,
always just be like chicken one day, feathers the next. You never know what's going to
yeah,
happen. Yeah.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
disorganized kind of attachment field, I would imagine, being both
yeah,
kind of like fascinated, in love with your parents, like wild lifestyle and the freedom they give you, and that's so great. But at the same time, like, oh my God, can you guys get it together and like feed me, house me? Like, yeah,
yeah,
that must be been
yeah,
hard at times. Maybe
yeah,
more as you were a teenager.
yeah. And that, yeah, that inner adulting, when you're a
Mhm.
kid, I'm just like watching and making sure everything's okay and trying to, yeah, tell them to rein it in. Like,
Right,
don't have the big dinner party for the famous artist that's coming and spend all your money so that
right,
we have it for the next couple of weeks. And be
right.
kind of watching those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also from that, learning to take risk
Mm,
and learning that money isn't everything.
mm,
It is this, and trust, some kind of trust,
mhm,
some real deep, deep trust that if we just keep in our heart and our passion and our community and moving, like we will somehow be carried. And
mm,
that's something that I have and feel.
mhm, mhm, mhm. So when did you start to differentiate? Was it the like desire to be an artist yourself and wanting to go like see the world? Like tell us when it started to become a problem as you did to become an adult.
Yeah, I was very enmeshed with my parents for a good into my late 20s,
Mm,
into my late 20s. I mean, it was a mesh. Now I look at it enmeshed. They were at that point, they had a gallery and it was in Boston and it was really fun to go to the openings. And there was a big community, some people from some of my friends, and it was so fun. Their life was really fun. So I
mm,
stayed very connected with them into my late 20s. And
mm,
then I guess what pulled me apart uh, was was when I went into yoga and spirituality. And that was very difficult for them when I was
mm.
doing that. They were really they did not like it. And
Really? That
yeah,
seems very unusual to me. I would assume that the disposition would be really complementary between the artist and the yogi.
no, yeah. And we would listen to Alan Watts a
Yeah.
lot and read Zen, and my parents had been really would talk a lot about all different cultures, but a lot of Asian cultures. And uh, but one of the things my dad often said was, in this house, there's no God and there's no sentimentality.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So art is, and he would say art is God, culture
Oh,
is God.
oh,
So there was a, yeah, and he had really been very Catholic. He almost became a priest at
oh.
18ish. He was thinking about being a priest. And they had left the Catholicism and left the church. And so they were very scared of organized religion. They really were worried that I was in a cult.
Okay. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
imagine, there's the guru and the many, probably largely young women who are nubile and flexible and adoring and stuff. I can see as a parent being like, no, you're not going to follow this guy. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
But it was also very, there was this one really hard moment when this was a really hard time. This was the biggest break. So I was living on this ashram in upstate New York, just outside the city, and I was coming back to the city. And it was an ashram, and there was a guru. The guru it was kind of convenient that this guru had died. I loved it that I met this guru and I really bowed to his feet, and then he died. So there was no living masculine body to have to worry about anymore. And it
Okay.
was just run by all these women. And they really believed in the arts. And there was a lot of art
Mm.
and culture. So I was living there and I did a performance. They had performances every weekend. And so I did this performance and people loved it. I got this huge standing ovation. It was about Saint Teresa of Avila and her ecstaticness, and it was butoh and some flute and some and pieces of her words spoken by somebody else. And this one woman, Linda Montano, is an incredible, incredible performance artist, uh, lifelong, well known. And she was there and she came up to me after and she was like, "This is an important piece. I support you. And this is so important." So I had this experience of this, and my parents came. Oh, I could cry. And the next morning, my father said, "Let's go in on a drive." And they literally had me locked in the car and he just tore the piece apart.
Oh.
He tore it apart. There was no structure. It was blah, 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 blah. I don't know. In some way, I feel like, and we would sometimes say this, he didn't want me to get bigger than him.
Yeah, that sounds insecure and jealous. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it was like I had this freaking standing ovation.
Yeah.
It was a monumental moment. So
Mhm.
that was a huge break. I literally didn't talk to my dad for some almost a year, but not really,
Hmm.
some months. And then
Good
I
for
put a
you.
bunch of divides. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I put a bunch of boundaries and divides for a while. It was
Hmm.
a big, big
Hmm.
break.
So by then you already knew butoh. Can you explain what butoh is for folks who, that's another word Marisa knows that she just sprinkled in there, seasoned the conversation with this like entire cultural reference. Tell us what butoh is.
Yeah, yeah. Butoh. So Butoh is this form of contemporary dance in Japan that was born in Japan. Sankai Juku is a big dance company that did it, and Kazuo Ono was a teacher of it. And some people say it comes from the horror of the atomic bomb. That's a lot of critical writing says that that amount of horror that humans had to experience um, birthed this. The
Mm.
Buddha artists themselves don't quite say that. There's a lot of animism. It's a lot of animism. It's so, and so at the time I had been dancing and I was being a theater, I was studying acting, and I found Buddha. So I'd already been to Japan. I had been to Japan as a teenager and lived there for a year as an exchange student. And then I went on to study Japanese and Japanese culture and at Barnard College in Columbia. And I was studying Japanese, but I didn't really want to be doing that. I wanted to be a theater artist. So I started taking dance classes and then I found Butoh.
Okay. Can we just also contextualize? So
Yeah.
this is like 80s, 90s when remember when Japan, it was like you have to learn Japanese because Japanese business is going to basically take over the world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your parents were like, you should you should go into business and learn Japanese so you can like do business with Japanese business people. That was like it's such an 80s show, right?
It was totally, totally that. And I just happened to land in it because I applied for this scholarship program to go study abroad and I spoke some French and I spoke Italian a bit. And so I thought I would go to France or Italy. And I applied for this in January. I thought in the fall I'd go there for a year. And they called me in February and said, "We're sending you to Japan in a month. You're going to Japan." And it was like out of the blue. And I just
Your
got
parents
sent
said that?
there. This
Oh wow.
scholarship program.
Oh, the
Just
scholarship.
you just applied and they sent you wherever they sent you in the world.
Oh, well, that's wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. You're going
And
to Japan.
you're going
Okay.
to Japan. So I just landed there in Japan at this. And then it came to be this time when there was this big Japanese financial electronic science boom.
Yes.
So
Yes.
then, and my parents, who were poor artists who had no future, so we're like,
Right.
you're going to go and study Japanese
That's right.
and
And
at an Ivy
computer
League
science. Yeah.
and take care of us when
Right.
we.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, but I don't want to. I really just want to go to New York and be an actress.
Yeah.
So I was in this like, studying Japanese and not wanting to. I had no vision of going into Japanese business. So I just focused on Japanese theater and
Mhm.
dance. And and then I ended up directing a play. And I found in New York in the late 80s, there was suddenly this interest in butoh. Butoh performers were coming to New York and teaching, and I was able to create these internships and go and
Oh,
study with these butoh artists that were in New York,
wow.
these
Wow.
amazing people, and I got to translate some
Wow.
stuff.
That's
Yeah,
wild. Okay, let's come back to Buto because Buto is a
yeah,
scene now. This is like
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
subculture of a subculture. It's like, okay, here's
yeah,
New York, here's the art scene, and then like underneath that is Buto. So you say it's animist. There's a sense of being moved by spirits in
yeah,
Buto. Is
yeah,
that right? Can you say a little bit more?
yeah.
If a person attends a Buto performance, what do we expect? Like, how is it different from other modern dance? How is it different from, um, yeah,
Yeah, that
like,
I think that liminal, that sense that it's ghostly, that you're feeling the other realms is very present. It often can be, it's mostly very slow. So you're really slowing down. And there is, when you're taught it, it's like you are moved by something rather than you moving, you're moved by something. So you feel like you're behind the movement or in the movement. And it is not pretty often. It can be very, very beautiful, but it there's a lot that's grotesque, these really weird faces and pulling up like the difficult, and you even like your finger, your hands could be really gnarled and you make crazy faces of your mouth hanging down.
Mhm.
um, yeah, and it just grew and grew and grew. From the time I was doing it, it was just this new thing happening in New York and in the West. And when I went, then I did go to Japan again, and I lived in a Kanazawa, which was another, not Tokyo, not in the main city. And I had my own apartment, but I studied with the husband and wife team butoh team, and then I would go to Tokyo and study. So I really got into it. And at that time in Tokyo, lots of people were coming from Europe and the States and Canada, from everywhere, to go and study butoh. I just
Okay, so
landed.
here I am. I'm
Yeah,
in a dark performance space. And the artist comes out, there's no choreography. I guess there's a sense of intention. Like, how did they decide? Like, what,
yeah,
okay, they're being moved by things, but tell
yeah,
me a little bit more about how the artist is deciding what is moving them and what this is a performance of.
yeah.
Because otherwise, it just sort of sounds like a seance. It sounds a little bit like
Yeah,
channel.
yeah, yeah. It is not. It's not at all.
Okay.
There actually is distinct choreography, and they will.
Oh,
Yeah, there is. There are, and it depends on the company, but there are definitely moves and
okay.
definitely things are choreographed. But it might be do the such and such thing from this point in the music to this point in the music, and there were definitely moves.
Okay.
So you could be, and it was physically difficult, really physically difficult. So when you're looking. They all often, it very key is they paint their faces white, and often their whole body's white. So everybody's painted in white, and the
Okay. This is
costume,
sounding more and more Japanese animist, I have to say.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah. And the costumes often were like torn apart. They looked like they had been aged. You would often get this thing about very aged looking things. Um, they would definitely, the Sankai Juko was very famous that they all hung upside down. They had this thing that they were in like a fetus position and they were hanging upside down by their feet and they unfurled and then were birthed onto the ground. And they did it. That was a key move of theirs. And they did it
Okay.
outside. And one dancer, the rope broke and he died. And
Oh
it
my
was a
gosh.
tragic, tragic accident. But they will do things that feel difficult to the body. Like really, there is something about pushing the body to its limit.
And dangerous and outside of the limits of
Yeah.
what we would
Yeah.
normally see in society in a
Yeah. And they lived
performance.
very out too. They were
Mm,
very, a lot of times, I hope they don't mind, like they would be sex workers. Some
mm,
of them to live sustainably was pretty usual.
mhm.
Um, show like entertainment. And you would see the same. One of my friends studied with this one company, and they had like their performance, their butoh on their stage performance moves, and then they had their strip moves.
Oh,
And they
yeah.
were not that different. Like, and one of them
Okay.
was like, who is the neko neko, which means who's the pussycat? And okay, so you're pussycat, so you lay back and I'll do you.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah.
Wow. Like it's a community, it's a culture, it's a whole world.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it, now in New York in the States, it's expanded internationally now. And I'm no longer involved except for seeing things occasionally. But it's huge, it's big all over. And a lot has moved to Europe. A lot of Japanese, probably because they're so outside, would
Mhm.
end up living in Europe. Kind of also
Mm,
American jazz performers ended up living in Europe.
mhm, mhm. So, okay, so then how today you are a somatic and sexual health practitioner. Um, so there's this journey. You're in Butoh, but there's something in between that and what you do now, where you had this career in New York as a feminist artist. So when you did become an artist, what was your art like?
Mm. It was fun. I liked, I did like being comedian. I liked comedy a lot, but it wasn't always comedic. Um, but and it's changed over time. So it started mostly movement, mostly dance, and then and it was feminist. I was so lucky in some ways, and where I landed, the way I landed in Japan in Budo, I also landed in New York after college, right at the end of college. I walked into this Lower East Side, East Village feminist performance art scene that was just fantastic. And come do, yeah, come perform, yeah, come put on your piece. And I walked into this um, time that was just incredible.
Mm. And so
Um,
when was this then?
that's like the early 90s, the early
Nice.
90s. Yeah, yeah, and the city was still quite dangerous and scary. It was
Yeah, yeah.
really, it was. So then I used props a lot. I would cut up very contemporary music, and I had a lot of props. I had this thing where we would often wear diapers on our head, and we would take diapers and put flower petals in them and open them up and get all these flower petals on our head, and then put the diapers on our head, and a lot of
What did
costume changes.
that represent?
It was something about the earth and trash.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Because the environmental movement, we were worried
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
ozone layer still, right? Like
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And diapers were
Okay.
going to the moon and back a million times. So
Right.
somehow there was a whole thing about that in the performance and this excess and talk.
Right.
Yeah,
That because there was disposable. Okay, this is for like people who are younger than us. That was like one of the things is if you piled up all the disposable diapers in the landfill. Is that what you mean? It would go to the moon and back multiple times
yeah,
because we had Pampers and stuff like that, basically putting plastic on babies' bums. I don't know what they do
yeah,
these days, but
yeah,
anyway, that was a big
yeah,
environmental key messaging at that time. And
yeah, yeah,
okay, so yeah, we
yeah,
you did that. You also did a really moving piece, the Pietà one.
yeah, yeah.
Can you
And
tell
I
folks about
also,
that?
yeah, and I'll go to the PIT. And I also then I would make these film things, and I was very I got to work with this woman, Jo Andres, who's a really incredible choreographer, and she projected film on moving material. So I
Mm.
did learn a lot from her. She passed away way too young. She was an incredible artist. And so I would make these projections too. I'd make films, and I did this whole series of comic book slideshows. And I had this, I was really interested in the mutant thing, the X-Men. I was super into the X-Men and the comic books. So I had this whole thing about superpowers and healing the world
Mm.
and that. And I would have these slideshow comic books and little films and stuff. And then I went on to, yeah, do more and more writing after that. Yeah, and the PA piece was awesome. That was like my exit. That was my last piece I did when I decided I was going to have a kid and get serious about money.
Mhm. Okay, oh, we were so young and naive. Yeah. Okay, so tell us about this masterful exit piece.
It was so much fun. Um, so I played the Madonna as the Pietà, who in Da Vinci's sculpture she's holding, and she's so big, and Jesus is really small, and she's holding him.
Like
So
he's
my
frail. He's come
yeah,
down off the cross and he's
and he's
a bag of
very
bones.
yeah, very frail. And in the Da Vinci thing, they talk about art history that it was really this disproportionate thing. The woman was so big, like she was so big, and there is this whole like when is the mother bigger
Mm.
than the Christ? And I was very interested in. I had a whole following of ecstatic saints. I really
Mm.
followed a lot of female saints and studied them and did work about them.
Mm.
So I didn't know what would happen. And I had another piece in this performance art on the stage in this performance art festival in Cleveland. And I said, "Oh, can I do a installation piece?" Well, because people are coming in and buying the tickets and going to the different stages. And it was these two staircases up to a platform as you walked into this hall. And I was sitting there all in these white, and I had some white makeup and all these white gown things like the Pietà. And I had a 4 or 5 minute tape that said, "Come, lay your suffering in my lap. I can hold it. Lay down your suffering. I hold the space. I hold the suffering." And some church bells. It was very slow, one sentence pause. And I didn't know if people would get it, that they were, it makes me cry, if they were going to get it, that they could
Mhm.
come and lay in my lap, that they could come and lay down their suffering. They could have a moment in the
And you
mother's
would
lap,
hold the space.
and I
Mhm.
would hold them and I would hold the space. And we had no idea what would happen. And people started like walking into the space and crying and walking up and smiling at me and like, "Oh, this is fun. Okay, I'm gonna lay in your lap." And they'd lay in my lap and start bawling. Like, and at one point, I was holding this big man, and I was like holding him, and I literally looked at my arms and I thought, I can't physically be doing what I'm doing. Like,
Mhm.
how the hell am I doing this?
Mhm.
And it was really, there was such, I had somehow this channel had come through, and I was physically doing this, and I did it for hours.
Mhm.
And it did take a long time to come back
Mhm.
to regular me.
Mhm. Mhm. What, okay, so as a feminist, what were you saying with that piece?
Yeah, as a feminist, like that, it just the power, it was the power you could get, right? It's the power of
Mhm.
space,
Mhm.
and in a way, in one of my identifiers, I really identify as having a vagina and having that the particular genitalia that I have. I'm very identified with it.
Mhm.
And it's a space. There,
Mhm.
and then there's other pieces, but and I'm really, but there is this bit about like the space and just holding the space and not doing anything,
Mhm.
and the mother and the womb and coming back to that place of just being held, that
Hmm.
it is
And the power. It
continually,
sounds like power, just pure power and strength. Yeah.
yeah. And then we could go back to it again. Like it's ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
That's ongoing.
Hmm. And I mean, there's so much to say about how Christianity has weaponized this power of women and oppressed us with that. The fact that I just heard the other day something like, um, women will work hard in a relationship, even if they're not totally in love with their partner. That's just like a thing that women will do. And not always, of course, but how that has been weaponized, that there is a capacity and competency around space holding and around service to
Yeah.
healing and service to the collective, that we will just do it because it feels like a biologically right thing to do.
Yeah.
There's like an imperative to like try to make things better, make things well, not just for ourselves but for others. So
Yeah.
lots to say about that, but I can
But
imagine how
yeah.
powerful it would have been to walk up to have you elevated above everyone, and then to walk up to this elevated female maternal figure, and that you don't actually know, but just that sense of universal maternal care. And I can imagine losing my shit in
Yeah.
public,
Yeah.
laying
Yeah.
in the
And
lap.
also she's got the power, right? And she's honored. So, when we think of like overworking and over servicing and over nourishing, how that gets weaponized. But there are those beautiful spaces where the mother is the one, in cultures where they took Christianity and really honor the mother
Mm,
and have a mother honoring. So that too, like I definitely, it was honored that, yeah.
mhm,
And I didn't, yeah, and I gained from it the same way. There's this possibility of this is the real deal as,
mhm.
yeah.
Hmm. And then, okay, so this is your master work as you leave this career as a feminist artist. You become a mother and you're like, okay, and now I'm gonna like get my shit together and have a career. Fast forward to today, you're a pleasure activist and a somatic health practitioner and all of this. And I mean, most of us are not rolling in the big bucks in this career. So,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
in sort of like what's the nutshell version of what happened after that brought you to where you are today, 20 some years later as your daughter's leaving the nest?
Yeah. Well, I think the whole pleasure activist piece and really getting interested in pleasure in a way is very similar to what I was attracted to about butoh in a way. It's like so, but right before my 30s, in my late 20s, I was doing yoga and I started realizing that sex was amazing. And something happened to me and sex that I was like, wow. So the potential for a body to have such magic,
Mm,
that there's magic available to us. And also that like most of I was having up to this point where I had it, I was just having it and it was okay, but I wasn't getting into the magic of it. I wasn't like
mm,
involved in it. It was just happening to me. And then it's like, wow, the potential of this. And that you basically can pretty much always have good sex. You don't have to have bad sex.
right.
Like you could, if it's bad, you can stop. So I just started studying and exploring it from when I was about 30, just all wherever I could. I would study. I studied the anatomy and I studied with teachers about it. Uh, and then somebody said, "Oh, you teach this." And
Mm,
so it's like, "Oh, do I? Oh, right. Okay."
right.
So I started teaching because somebody asked me to. But I think
Mm,
it's, yeah, the kind of magic that is available inside of my love of what the body can do, and the way Buto is this like image. And one of my I mean, I do love image and sexuality too for myself I love image. Like,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm. And so because what, how old are you again?
I'm 60,
Yeah, you're
almost 60,
60, exactly. So it's
61
been,
in 2 days.
oh, yay, huzzah. So you've had 30 years of this kind of practice. And now the term pleasure activism is more mainstream.
Yeah.
And though, yeah, still a little bit outsider status. But one of the topics that I think is so important that you foreground in your work is consent work. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us a bit about where your work has taken you lately around teaching about consent and how that plays into the magic of sex and sexuality?
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. It's so big. It's so important. And when I found that, I was like, oh, yeah, this is it. I mean, it's very important to, especially people with vaginas, to really understand their system because
Mhm,
nobody teaches us and our system is very complicated. So
mhm,
that I think is very important to
mhm,
learn your system and understand it. But then when this consent thing. So Betty Martin is this wonderful, wonderful sex educator, and she created the Wheel of Consent work. And she did this beautiful, she's so generous in her teaching. So it's in the 20, maybe 2015, 2016, around there. I found it through someone I was studying with. I found her work, and you could go on her website, and she really had these incredible videos that she would teach you all about it. And she would say, go out and teach it. Go ahead. She would say, it was, I mean, who does that now?
mhm. Yeah.
Right? There was no come and get my degree. Yeah, she has a program. She has a thing now, sort of a licensing, but she was like, any of you who can really drop into this, here are just like a couple of rules I want you to follow. And
Mhm,
don't say you are teaching the wheel of consent, but you can use the teaching of the wheel and consent in what you teach. It was like
mhm.
incredibly generous.
Yeah.
So I just started practicing and teaching from there. And then I did go on and study with her and do her training program like a pro. Um, so it's this wheel of consent, these four quadrants. You have give and receive, and then you have take and allow, and these big questions of who is it for? And who is it for could be different from who's doing the action. And these exercises, these incredible exercises. And as Betty says, and as I find when I work with people, she made this to have better sex, but people are like, oh, I do this in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
I do this, this is what I do. Oh my gosh. Like I
Right.
never receive. I
Right.
I never sit and receive. I'm
Right.
always ready to give. And I'm sort of sitting there through the receiving until it's time to give back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not really allowing, or I'm not really taking, or I'm not like just to kind of recognize what's the somatic and emotional experience of your own presence. I just have to imagine that in order to be a pleasure activist, you need to have a solid foundational understanding of consent work because you're going to inevitably come up against, especially if you're working with people with vaginas, you're going to come up against violation and
Yeah.
sexual trauma and history. And even if it's um if you are one of the small percentage of women who hasn't experienced some sexual violation, we're all subject to patriarchy's male gaze, and so whatever we've also internalized about our body and all of that. So I have to imagine that this is really, people might come to you maybe for your like date night stuff. They come as couples and then they learn this. And I bet a lot of people are like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like this is, oh wow, I have to reevaluate my whole way of being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. And of course, being a yoga teacher, that we didn't have any sense of in the 80s, in the 90s of consent,
Mhm.
some of the places I was studying and as a teacher myself, and even as I was first teaching about sexuality, like I didn't have any concept. we walk around the room and just grab people's butts and pull them up in the air. And,
Right.
there wasn't like, hey, I'm going to like wrap my arms around your butt and lift it up in the air and pull you back. Is that okay with you? Are you
Right.
up for that?
Yeah. Yeah.
We would
How
just
would that be for you?
reach into people's inner thighs and like pull them back. Like it was insane what we were
Wow.
doing with consent. And I
Yeah.
still like, you know, many practitioners, many places, we don't. And one of the things too, Betty talks about is we come up against so much is happening against our consent all the time. And it's happened since we were a baby. So there's like a healing in it. There's such a healing in it now to just access it. And we're going to make mistakes
Mhm.
and then we can pause and notice it. And so many things are entering these exercises. And then I love when she says, and I've taken to, what did you notice? So we just did this
Mhm.
exercise. What did you notice? What came up? I
Mhm.
remember when the first time I was in this big circle and we were all introducing ourselves in this wheel of consent. I feel like I might have told you this story. Um, we were just saying where we're from and why we're here. And I was like getting like this panic inside of me, just this panic, just to say where I was from and why I wanted to study consent like this. And then when it came to my turn, I said, I live in New York City. And I just like I hadn't even realized how much non-consensual touch I receive all the time living in a very dense city.
Mm.
Like I get on the subway and at that time when I went, like in right before the pandemic, New York City was so crowded and you would ride the subways, not even in rush hour, and be smushed up against people and in their faces. And I just was in this non-consensual touch for hours and hours of my day and blocked up against it and wasn't even thinking about it and wasn't paying
Mm.
attention to how it was affecting me. And
Mhm.
to just be like, oh my gosh, wow, I put up with that and I don't even think about it.
What would
And
be the alternative? Or is it kind of like the acknowledgement is the healing? Or is it that you like
yeah,
go, oh wow, I am subjected to non-consensual touch and now I have these other practices, but you have to link consciously.
yeah,
I'm using these practices because I'm reclaiming. Like, can
yeah,
you
yeah.
describe a little bit about how that was helpful?
So then you could go on the subway and you would say, okay, I'm making a choice. This is my choice. I'm going in the subway. I'm going to be up against people. And you're making choice constantly. You might be dialoguing with your body. Like
Mm.
if there was another way, I would do this differently. Sometimes I learned to ride the ferry in my bicycle or
Mhm.
just not take it as much but giving myself tools, coming off of the subway and shifting, even all the somatic things that we do now, realize like, okay, now I go back to, I smushed myself
Mhm.
consciously so I could avoid touch. Now I'm back out in the world and here's my skin again. And here's where I can make choice and being really conscious of it and taking
Mhm.
care of myself as I go
Mhm.
through these pieces.
Mhm.
And maybe also being, like having moments to like say, hey, you're another human being and you're in my face. Like I'm actually going to acknowledge this instead of just going into this
Right.
complete shutdown.
Right.
I'm going to be here and I'm very conscious and how much can I not do and start communicating with people around you because you get in there and you don't. And
Mhm.
now I'm like, hey,
Right. Eye contact. Is that
yeah,
maybe that's the answer to the question I was about to ask, but maybe there's something else. Like, what do you wish more, like women and non-binary people, especially living under patriarchy, what do you wish they knew about, or like what skill do you wish they would lean into regarding practicing consent in like ordinary non-sexual ways like that?
yeah. I I think there's going to be three, but three of these things. So one, I love this process in the wheel of consent. So it is is separating. First is this idea of I want. What do you want? And so we do this practice of really trying to drop into what do you want? Because so much sex is I'll take what's given and I'll see if I like it. Maybe there'll be something I like here. And then just to say, just to really like, what do I want? And just stay there, hang out there in what do I want? That's it. And that is a singular action to drop into what you want in the here and now. And it is a completely new and separate action to ask for it. You might not. You might just sit in the want, you see. But then to ask for your want is a separate action. Hey, I want this. Will you give that to me? Will you do that with me? Will you do this? Or I want this. May I do
I could
this
see,
for you?
yes, these are two totally different functions.
They're totally different. And we
Because
just,
it's like, okay, dropping into what I want. I could do that. And then I can feel the fear and a little bit of tearfulness coming, even though I don't know what that is about. This is like a whole
yeah,
therapeutic session. So, folks, this is why you would connect with Marisa
yeah,
a session
yeah,
to be like,
yeah,
why am I feeling so much emotion about the idea of, and now I'm going to ask for what I want.
yeah.
That's a whole separate
A
skill and
whole
function.
separate skill. And we smush them together.
Yeah.
We smush them right together. So you don't even feel that want for a million reasons, a million reasons. And going through that process of why aren't you asking for your want? Because I'll never get it. And I'll be disappointed because whatever.
Or I don't like that I want it.
Yeah, I might get there and I don't like it. I'll get it. Then I'll be unhappy about it. But if we start to do the process, it's extraordinary. And then the getting the yes or the no is yet another step and pausing there. So that's huge. That whole thing, and really identifying your want, identifying your want. Then the second thing, but I just have to say this, think about it. We're sitting there and you're like, oh, I'm really thirsty. I want a glass of water. And like among a couple or in a family, you're like, oh, I'm really thirsty. I really want. We just say that. We say like, oh, I really want da da da. And within whatever dynamic, it could be like, oh, you're asking me to get it for you. No, I'm not,
Okay.
And people can see that, like, oh, every time I hear my partner say their want, I think they're asking for me to do something about it. No, they're just expressing their want. You do. There's nothing has happened. But that's another, like, across certain gender dynamics, like all sorts of stuff is going on. And to just stop and notice right there.
And have an agreement. I'm just identifying my want. That isn't pressure for you to have to meet that need. It's just, I want what I want, and I'm working on just even processing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Just stop and process that want. Period.
Yeah.
So that's
it's okay to want what I want. That's a whole thing.
Oh, and then we say that. We do this great exercise of like, we go, what do you want? And then the person says it, and they go, great. It's great to want. It's good to want. Let's sit in that want. Let's sit there a minute. Yeah. Yeah.
I can see how that builds the want too. Because there's also that, like, I have a want and now I need it to be met right away instead of maybe lingering in wanting in itself could be pleasurable.
Yeah. Wanting in itself.
Instead of uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a painful sense of like loss because you want and you don't have right now. You could want and you could savor the yearning.
Yeah. And you're also like, I want to lay in some puffy clouds and float and feel like I could do this for as long as I want. Now you can name that and you're kind of already getting it.
Right. Yeah, let's do the exercise. I want a lemon. I want to suck on a lemon. And like everybody can feel it right now, right?
Yeah,
it's like just even the saying it, your brain doesn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're still at the first thing. And you said there's like
two or three.
I'm like, wow, I already have like 5 exercises.
One more. to say no, to
Oh,
practice saying no, to just practice saying no. I mean, how many times do I have couples come and we practice saying no, or we just like, we're going to do this exercise and here we're just going to practice saying yes, practicing the yes and the no, just slowing down and saying no. And having people light bulbs like, oh my God, I didn't realize I could say no to my husband. Like I committed to this person forever and I can say no. Wow. Just and going through all the stuff about saying no, practicing it,
Right. And receiving no, so
receiving the
that
no.
you then don't become a problem for the person who said no, that you can take care of yourself. I actually found that very powerful myself. I'm starting to say that with clients. I can receive your no.
Yeah.
In doing that, it made me way better at receiving no.
Yeah.
And so it's like I don't take a lot of stuff as personally as I might have before.
Yeah.
I think because of that ritual of being able to reassure people, I can receive your no, the practice of it fostered the ability. Yeah. This is
Yeah.
very, I could see how this is
Yeah.
like super powerful stuff.
Yeah. And then the third one. Okay. So the third one, I love this. Like allowing this thing about take, right? So oftentimes with women and non-binary people, right? The partner's doing something to you, and they're like, here the classic is like, oh, I give oral sex. Like, I'll give you lots of oral sex. I'll eat you out. You'll be happy. Whatever it is, you don't actually want it. That's not what you
Right.
want to receive. But
Yeah.
what's interesting is that idea about really acknowledging having people who are doing this thing to you so often that the power partner is doing something to you, but it's actually for them. It's not for you.
Yeah.
So they love to be in that texture of a
Oh,
ball.
yeah. They
And
love
they're
the
in
whole
there.
thing. They're in it
They're in
for
it.
however long.
And it's okay, right? It's okay. It's like, this is for you. Let's just say
Right.
who this is for me. This is who this is for. That's
Right.
actually not what I want.
Right.
So noticing that maybe your partner is doing something and it goes back to the want, it's like, wait, I don't want this, but it's like, it could be they're doing it for them, and you're actually perfectly fine with that if you acknowledge. I love when I have
Right.
couples, right? Like, oh, he likes this thing and it drives me crazy because he wants me to like it and I don't like it. And then when we dropped into this whole thing about it's him, it's for him. And she's like,
Mhm.
oh, it's for him. Okay, I'm cool to do it some. It's for
Right.
him. And then of course, with all of that is you are learning about and also for us to be intake, for women to be
Yes.
intake, for
Yeah.
women and non-binary people to say, may I,
Hmm.
may I take hold of your parts and squeeze them? May I touch you for me? I'm
Right.
touching you and it's for me to be
Hmm.
intake. And
Hmm.
when you do like, I'm not prey, to be
Yeah.
predator, to be like, I'm gonna
Hmm.
eat you up,
Yeah. Yeah.
to be a date.
Not
More,
quite soft animal. More,
yeah,
more, more.
I'm bringing in a lot more predator. Yeah,
Yeah. More. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's
in
consensual. And it's
yeah,
like, yes,
yeah.
I
And let's
love this.
inhabit the predator. Let's take a growl. Let's I
Hmm.
want you. I'm biting you for me.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, okay, so you're teaching this not only as a woman of 60, but also as a person who has obviously noticed at some point along the line your physical body struggling to function, quote unquote,
Mhm.
normally, right? I want to sort of bring that piece in as well to pleasure activism in terms of dynamic disability and also aging and things like that. So, did something specific happen um, that led to some kind of illness or pain or disability, or did your body just kind of start to take on some mysterious pain and fluctuating ability? Like, tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about how that now is a big influence in your life.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
work.
And it definitely would be an identity that I didn't say. Like I call it, I'm intermittently disabled. I have flare-ups that come and go and sometimes quite severe. Um, it started, when I started dancing, I had terrible back pain, just like terrible back pain. And so that led me to yoga to just like, and it really was about trying to fix this. And at that point, I really, I was probably doing a lot of somatizing, and
Mm.
so Sarno's work really helped me. That worked for some time. Sarno's work worked.
I don't know what that is.
It's Sarno.
Once again, I'm like, you just
Yeah,
know all the things. I'm like, what is that? Okay, tell
but
me about Sarno.
I know the
Yeah.
old stuff. He wrote a book like Heal Your Back Pain or something, and he really
Okay.
was like, talk to your pain and like, hey body, what
Mm.
is it that I'm not paying attention to?
Okay.
And it's like it's trauma really. Essentially like, hey body, what is it? You don't need to exhibit pain. What is it that I'm not paying attention to? If and then you try to feel what is going on. What are you not paying attention to? What is it? And he's like, body, I know it. I'm paying attention to it. I'm taking care of myself. You don't have to exhibit in my body. So for some
Mm.
time, some of my pains I was able to do that. And then I went to I went to India to study yoga with this Ashtanga guru. And it was right after that. So I went to study with Pattabhi Jois and learn Ashtanga in India. And he was completely molesting
Yeah, he's
people.
famously abusive, right? Hmm.
And it was very weird. Like he would just hold someone's breast and be looking out in the space on the yoga platform, or you could see, you'd be like, so I went there and it was very upsetting to go there and see it happening. He would just be holding certain women differently than men, but it was so non-sexual. It was just like, hey, I can just hold this butt and nobody cares. And and he was like in his 80s. So he touched me in a way that I went through a whole process there that was very hard of first getting there, being very upset, resisting it, and then I just like I'm always on the out, and then I just dropped in, and I literally dropped in and like kissed his feet, and I want to do this practice. I'm here. I'm going to commit to this practice. And I'm going to do it. And I started then just not paying attention to this stuff that was happening.
Which
And
does seem like the shutdown that happens when
yeah,
you're in a
oh,
cult, right?
total.
This is what your parents were
Yeah,
worried about, but it's like much later on
yeah,
in life when the trauma is just so pervasive and it like
yeah,
switches your brain to the
yeah,
inability to really stay with reality. Yeah,
yeah,
I have so
yeah.
much
And it was,
compassion for
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, total, huge cult dynamics in this. And all my friends are there, and we've all come from New York to do this, and everybody's doing it, and all the people making excuses for it, and what would happen to me professionally as a yoga teacher. And then he touched me in a way that was just so over the top. It was so beyond, beyond, beyond unbelievable. And in the middle of this practice, he literally pinned me down and then did this thing to me. And just subtle, almost like, let's see if how this texture of this clothing is. Like very, but so invasive. And I just got up and left. And um, and went through a process of not telling anybody, not talking about it because it really wasn't safe to talk
Hmm.
about it. I would know, but everybody was making excuses for it. It was so big and happening, and so the overall was people were making excuses for it because you wanted to do this amazing practice that made you so strong and
Hmm.
was wonderful to feel.
Matthew Remsky's written a whole book
Yes,
about this. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
we
And
should.
we connected a lot. We connected a
Mhm.
lot in his process. I was somebody that he talked to a lot,
Hmm.
and I talked
Hmm.
to him a
And
lot.
we'll put it
Yeah.
in the show notes if anybody's feeling
Hmm.
triggered by this right now. There's a whole community of
Yeah.
folks who would affirm and validate why
Yeah.
this is triggering and upsetting. And yeah, Matthew's book, I can't remember it right now, but it's something about, I blurbed it. I can't remember what it is, but it's a few years old. Anyway, sorry, carry on. I just want to take care of listeners who are
definitely. And the scene has changed. It's has come out, and this abuse has been accepted and validated, and there's been ways that he's taken off the pedestal. But it was still hard to come back to the yoga world and see him. I mean, it was awful to go and just want to keep practicing yoga and have his picture up. And so then I banged my foot dancing. And right after I came back to New York. But I spent time traveling, and I was really healing, and I really did take care of myself quite well with the whole thing. And one of the ways I took care of myself was to make a one-woman show about it too, which Matthew watched, and we talked about it a lot. It was very sweet. But I banged my foot, and it just would not get better. And I had this plantar fasciitis for years, but like very extreme. I couldn't walk. I would sit in my living room and sit down, and I'd say, "Oh, I got everything I need, and I'm just gonna sit. I'm not gonna stand up. Oh, I forgot a pen. I have to go to the kitchen and get a pen." Like it was so painful to walk. So that happened. That was a big, and I couldn't walk for a couple of years. And it since then will come and go. I've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. I don't think it is that. Yeah. And what was the question? So
so this must be a big part, though, of like when you're doing Wheel of Consent, when you're doing pleasure activism.
Yeah.
Does that make things a little bit more challenging, I guess? Or, do you find that this is a group or a population that you really want to work with now? Because it sounds like that would be a really central aspect of your life.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to negotiate pleasure when you're negotiating pain a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, the Wheel of Consent is so amazing. And that world there's a lot, people with disability are very attracted to that world. It's kind of amazing. I remember like this one moment where I was having sex and I was in some position and some body part hurt. And I could see my mind go like, oh, we'll change positions soon enough and that won't hurt. And I was like, fuck that. Like, when did I ever think that was okay or a good idea? Excuse my foot hurts. Can you move over?
Right.
Come on.
Yeah.
So there's so much room in that Wheel of Consent for disability and allowance. You're really making agreements and talking about what you need and what you want and what's necessary. So that was a place where I could start to drop into that identity, because before that in the yoga world, it was like, oh, I'm broken. Something's wrong with me. I can't walk. I'm broken. I can't make money. I'm broken. It took a while. The Wheel of Consent was very helpful. And then really acknowledging capitalism and systems of oppression, that we're only our value is what we can do. And that has been so helpful to be with that, to really allow that space of like, I am disabled. I am so, and it's freaking hard sometimes.
Yeah, capitalism makes it hard. You've taught a class called Soft Animals for a long time in the network, and occasionally to the wider public as well. Soft Animals, where it's a movement practice with music, with optional therapeutic tremoring. You've also led us in the network in a really beautiful pelvic steaming workshop to give us some basic understanding and tools for that. That was my first time. I'm Gen X. I'm like the older goop generation. I've heard of pelvic steaming, but I kind of associated it with that sort of love and light, potentially spiritually bypassing kind of thing. The way you do it is very culturally sensitive and very well situated. So I appreciated that. But you have so many tools in your toolkit to support people. Such a great body of work around sexual health, pleasure, body love, well-being, art expression. as we move to wrap up, tell us what you're most excited by and like where your work is guiding you these days.
Yeah. I honestly feel like I'm in a bit of a pause.
Mm.
I'm in this pause. Like what, like there's so much going on in my life and there's so much going on in the world. I'm just like really trying to, what do people need? Like, how can I best? And it's often so much work to get the clients to help people to like, just like, okay, where do I need to go? And I'm listening. Do I want to teach consent to doulas? I don't, I don't know. And honestly, like where my daughter is right now, this launch space,
Going to
it's
college.
going to college, becoming a young adult in the world right now is so huge. And I feel like nobody talks about it. Where are the books on this? I mean, I like we talk about the whole parenting thing and like, are we talking? So really, oh, do I need to address this? What do I need to do? I'm really, so we'll see. We'll see. Steaming in the birth world. I wish I could get steaming to births. It would be transformational.
Mm.
What is the
And so
work?
that's why you would work with doulas so that they
Yeah,
could take it to their clients. Oh, that's fascinating. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like Wheel of Consent is still actually super basic,
yeah,
especially
yeah,
for a Gen X and above kind of crowd. Like, we're
yeah,
not old, but we are too old to not know about consent and not like we
yeah,
understand the idea of it and we worry about it for our younger generations. But I feel like uh yeah, we have a lot of practice to do. So and so if people
yeah.
want to do work with you individually or as couples, tell us like a little bit about what are you offering these days?
Yeah, I do want to get something where it's like a group coaching course. I will do that. Like I'm pausing, but it's gonna come. But I work individually with people and we do the wheel of consent exercises. You can do them like just like we just did with that lemon. You can totally do it online. It's almost even easier than in person. So,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe I teach you your anatomy. So I do one-on-one coaching where, and as Betty would say, sometimes it's just having a cup of tea and talking about sex.
Mm-hmm.
It's really having a nice, healthy conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes it's sharing some skills and the wheel. So I do that
Mm-hmm.
with more individuals and also with couples. But it's easier as with the individuals. So I do that.
Yeah.
And then I do steaming with people. And I
Mm-hmm.
can do that online as well, teach people how to steam. And sometimes and people like to steam with me because we can have a meditation or do a space
Mm-hmm.
together around it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so
You
those
hold the
things.
space and
Yeah.
it's very private, right? Like in this, especially if you're doing it on Zoom, a person could be off camera, but
Yeah.
you could like sort of see their setup and then go off camera and you'd be there to ask questions and like guide them through a guided journey, which would be amazing. As a person who has hired a sex coach and done like sexual therapy and things like that, it is just really nice to have a cup of tea and have somebody say like, where are you stuck, or like
Mhm.
what's not awesome right now
Yeah.
about your sex life, and then just to be able to talk about it in a specific container that isn't just kind of shooting the shit with your gal pals, but
Yeah.
actually somebody who's listening and very attuned to your vocal prosody, the what you want to talk about, what you avoid, whether you know what you want. I mean, having skillful conversation about that seems
Yeah.
invaluable to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay,
Totally.
so here we come to our last question, and
Yeah.
I'm going to add this little piece onto it. Like, how's your collapse going, Marisa? Because the last question is always, how are you coping with grief and rage? And in the 10 years that I've had this podcast, suddenly people are using the term collapse a lot more. I
Yeah.
mean, I've had over 30 or 50 episodes where I've talked about collapse, but it seems like that's where I feel kind of outsider. But I feel like I
Yeah.
can ask you that. How's your collapse
Yeah.
going? How are you coping with grief and rage?
Yeah. Wow. Um, I feel like I'm getting a small reprieve at the moment, which seems weird, but there's a slight reprieve around collapse in in my own life. It's still there. So my dad died really well.
Mm,
My dad died. He was in so much physical pain. His body was a mess. And so you see people just like live way too long in too much pain and not functioning body. It really wasn't, he had to go. So
mm,
that was really great. It could have been so much more collapse, the amount we would have had to care for him. It was
mhm,
already honestly killing my mother to take care of him
mhm,
and very stressful. So him dying in this very beautiful way
mm,
at the right time
mhm,
was a big relief. Like, oh.
mm,
And my brother has been living with a cancer, a very, very aggressive cancer, for 2 years now, I think. And when he first got the diagnosis, the data around it was 4 months to a year that he would live. It really was a very rare and very aggressive cancer. So I was really living with feeling like he could die. And he and his partner decided to have one more child. So through her pregnancy, I really was holding that he might not live to the end to see his child born. He was very, very sick through it, you know. But this experimental medicine that he's taking has held it together. It's kept his cancer at bay. And I'm really like, oh, I can finally just feel like he's not going to die tomorrow.
mm.
I was holding that he was going to maybe die in the next month or so or whatever for like 2 years.
Wow.
So I'm just able to go, okay,
Mm,
until it hits some organ that's really bad, I can have a little sigh. And
mm,
so I can just focus on my daughter for a little bit,
mm,
and my mother, right? And just maybe have a little bit of energy for the outside world of collapse. The collapse in my immediate family has been so huge for the last few years that
mhm,
I hardly, of course I'm watching it and I'm in it and I'm here, but it's just been in my immediate family, the collapse has been so intense. In my own body. I
yeah.
couldn't,
Yeah.
it was only a few months ago that I could barely, barely, barely walk.
Mhm,
And I was
mhm,
just pushing through a life that was like not viable, but I
mhm,
had no other way.
mhm,
I am walking well right now. So that also, I'm in this whatever phase. I'm actually taking a medicine that is working.
mhm,
Maybe something's working.
mhm,
We'll see. So that's what's doing it. And I'm like, that's kind of where I am with collapse. And at the moment, I feel like I can almost breathe for a moment.
mhm, mhm. Do you feel like the grief is now waiting for you, or do you feel like you've been in the grief? You've been tending to it, or have you
Oh
just
yeah.
been kind of in survival mode?
No, I've been tending to it. Yeah.
Mhm,
I've been definitely tending to, yeah, the grief and the rage. But some of it is very sweet,
mm,
actually. Some of the grief tending is sweet. Like my dad is very sweet, right? Right here, sitting by me. Like there's moments of being with somebody who's gone that I can't say that it's better, but I mean, right now, because of where he was and how painful it was, like it's kind of better where he is.
mhm,
His art was really painful for me when he was alive,
mm,
because it was such a collapse for my whole family.
mm,
Like the amount that my mother had to financially work to care for his art made me not able to see the art that he made. Now that he's physically gone, I am able to look at his art and be like, oh my gosh, he was a genius. His art is cool.
mm,
That's another
mhm,
process of grief, right? Living with people in a different way.
mhm,
Yeah, but definitely grieving it and, holding my mother's hand a lot,
mhm,
being with her,
mhm, mhm.
still being with everybody. It was, yeah.
Once again, you're holding the space.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
are the art.
Mm.
Thank you so much for the ways that you've held space in the network. And thank you for your stories. You're so fascinating. And honestly, somebody ought to make a movie. It'd be so great. It has like a, if Desperately Seeking Susan was made in the 70s kind of vibe, like just very kind of zany, and
Yeah.
also an adventure, and also kind of tales of the city, and also put a little like terms of endearment in there. It's so great. It's so great. Thank you so much for sharing your
I
stories,
hope somebody
Marisa. It's a
does.
delight.
Thank you. And thank you. We do want to say you created soft animals. Thank you for that gift.
Yeah, thank
I
you. Yeah.
love it when you passed it on to me. Thank you. And thank you for the network and for this beautiful community. I feel like it's allowed me to shine and grow even
Mm,
more.
Well, onwards, upwards, more growth,
Woo!
please, for Marisa. Yay. Ah, so good. If you would like to connect with Marisa for a session about consent or pleasure or pelvic anatomy and health, or to have a personal pelvic steaming session for relaxation or healing work, maybe to mark a special moment or to potentially help ease some pain before you menstruate, these are all possibilities in one-on-one sessions over Zoom. So you can go to her website, Marisa Sullivan Healing, which I'll post in the show notes. And you can find your show notes either in your podcast player or at numinouspodcast.com. If you're in Brooklyn or New York, she also does in-person one-on-one sessions, and she also hosts select group events and workshops. So you'll want to get on her newsletter and follow her on Instagram. She often posts about her in-person events and online events on her Instagram stories. She also posts a lot of really helpful and cool education in her stories. Some of that real talk, So I highly recommend you follow her on Instagram, and I'll post that link in the show notes too. Okay, so this is the moment, listener shoutouts. This is when I either go to a review of my book or I look at where the downloads have been on the podcast. This time, actually, I went to Goodreads to see if there were any new reviews of either of my books, The Spirited Kitchen or Spells for the Apocalypse. And normally what I would do is I would then thank whoever took the time to say something nice or helpful or constructive. Even though they're not listeners, I still like to sort of put it out into the ether, some gratitude. And after I read some of the new reviews for Spells for the Apocalypse, I did what I always do, and I went to look then at the reviews of some comparables. In publishing, a comparable is just what it sounds like. It's a book of approximately the same size and length, not necessarily the same topic, but in a similar category. I always go to the comparables of much more established and highly regarded authors, like people that I really admire, and that, even some that are like, I'll look at comparables by like New York Times bestsellers, for instance, which is what I did this time. So I read the reviews of people that I would consider like actual writers, disciplined wordsmiths who devote their lives to studying writing, developing their voice and style, reading extensively, publishing their much worked over work, their belabored work, the things that they really like pour their blood, sweat, tears, and like years and years of expertise and practice into. I am not a writer. I'm just an author. I'm just a person who puts some of my thoughts and like things that I teach in workshops into book formats. So I look at the reviews of real writers to feel better about my own reviews. Because honestly, my friends, Goodreads reviewers are fucking brutal. So, okay, this is when the F-bomb comes. Okay, so the F-bombs are coming. Some episodes are just like that. The pendulum is swinging now, and we're shifting from contact nutrition Carmen into depressed and doesn't give a fuck Carmen. Okay, so my book, Spells for the Apocalypse, is considered a gift book. That's what my publisher wanted, right? They said they actually declined. They had right of first refusal on my second book, and they didn't want the pitch. They were like, we're kind of done with like trauma and relationship type stuff. We want more magic stuff. We would like an extension of the Spirited Kitchen, but just like without the recipes, basically. And we want it to be a gift book, meaning it's going to be small in size. It has a pretty eye-catching cover, like aesthetically pleasing. It should be short and pretty light fare. It's meant to be read casually. You can pick it up and put it down pretty easily. But most importantly, it's meant to make a great gift. It's a giftable kind of thing. Gifts for yourself and others, that kind of thing. That's what my publisher wanted. And I was like, my agent was like, it's easier to get your next books published if they see that your first publisher wanted to do more than one book with you. Great. Okay, fine. So when publishers are putting out a gift book, they already have channels that they hope to sell it into and at a specific time of year. And that's really kind of all they care about. They'll tell you, yes, no, we want backlist titles, meaning a book that's going to stay in their catalog that they try to keep selling into places for years to come. But gift books are not like that, really. They put them out at a specific time of year. That's when it sells. And then it'll fall off the list. They don't keep pushing it. So, for instance, Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, The Serviceberry, it came out in November 2024, exactly in time for Christmas gift-giving season, which is perfect because Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, The Serviceberry, is a gift book. It's small, it's beautiful. The content of it is awesome too, because it's about reciprocity and the gift economy. It's a really like anti-consumerist kind of book. It's super wholesome, but it's also quite deep. And it's the kind of thing that you can pretty much like pick it up and open up the book anywhere. You can read 20 pages in a sitting, kind of between tasks, and then put it down, feeling better than you were when you picked it up, okay? So I went and looked at a gift book that was in kind of an environmental type theme as a counterpoint to Spells for the Apocalypse. My friends, if thousands of people are going to take time out of their day to go give Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer a 3 out of 5-star review because they, quote, weren't really in the mood for this topic, or because, like, quote, it wasn't long enough, or it was too short, or because it wasn't deep enough, or because it was too deep, or because it didn't have enough science, or it had too much economics. Like, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, people. It's a little pocket-sized, beautifully illustrated gift book. Oh my God. I mean, if thousands of people are going to take time out of their day to give that esteemed, illustrious public figure 3 out of 5 stars review, then I don't know, like, what's a person like me supposed to do? Like, what do people want? Okay, so the shout out today is actually for 2 people, Erica and Emma. One is a positive example of how to leave an honest review for somebody's piece of work, their book. And the other is a negative example, okay? So how not to leave an honest review. And I'm sharing this because it's such a great illustration of the insidious nature of patriarchy and capitalism working hand in hand to effectively silence women, especially women creatives, and especially women who want to be who aspire to be like public intellectuals, or don't aspire to be, they just want to have ideas in public. And how patriarchy silences them so well. It shapes us so well that it teaches women to commodify and dehumanize other women without even thinking about it, without even blinking an eye, without even pausing to consider
them as full humans at all. And so this in turn invisibilizes the patriarchy at play. If you can get women to do it to other women, you can kind of erase the patriarchy at play and be like, no, it's just like, it's either true or it's human nature or that's, the girls fighting or whatever. But my friends, it comes from patriarchy and it's weaponized by capitalism. Okay, so here's Emma, who gave my book, my cute little gift book, Spells for the Apocalypse, Practical Magic for Turbulent Times, a 3-star review. And Emma wrote quite simply, I don't know what I was expecting. Quote unquote, that's the whole review. I don't know what I was expecting. Well, I don't fucking know what you were expecting either, Emma, considering what you got is right there in the title and continues on for 200 more pages. Emma, it fucking says it right in the title, what to expect. But let's be fair. Maybe that is still a bit unclear. And so when you open the book, right on the very first page on the inside cover, this is what it says. An empowering ritual guide for living through turbulent times. Witchcraft has the capacity to transform your life. In this book of rituals and remedies, trauma recovery practitioner, clinical hypnotherapist, animist, and practicing witch Carmen Spaniola offers methods to support emotional well-being, strategies for stress management and self-regulation, and more. Part magic, part self-help, Spells for the Apocalypse teaches you how to counteract unconscious behavior patterns, reestablish stability, and restore resilience during periods of personal upheaval through straightforward spells and 5-minute rituals. Okay. It's wordy, Emma. I'm not going to lie. So my editor wrote that. I still think it's pretty clear, Emma. If any of those words in that order didn't make sense to you, then probably this wasn't the book for you. It just wasn't resonating. You had a clear choice point right there, though. And I'm not trying to be too condescending at this point, okay? Maybe this rant will come off as condescending. Maybe it will become more condescending as it progresses. But at this point, I am just trying to be clear. This is the buyer beware statement that every publisher sweats over. And that's why the editor writes the book description on the back cover or the inside cover. Okay, this is their buyer beware statement of the publisher. And they try to make it super clear because they've bought the rights and they want to make sure that this book gets sold accurately so it gets reviewed fairly. Okay? So that part is written by the publisher, the editor, not the author, because it's really the publisher's work. I don't own this work. They give me like commission basically on it, but I don't own it. The publisher has the rights. So they are trying to beat you over the head with what it is because they want it to be reviewed fairly because that's how it gets more sales for them. Okay, aside from that though, what I actually want to address to Emma is this. What did you think you were doing when you took time out of your day to leave a 3-star review like that? Like just a vague statement like that with 3 out of 5 stars. I guess we'll never know. So I'm just going to have to surmise, Emma, based on your behavior and words, and I'll tell you what I think. I think, Emma, that you weren't paying attention. And while you weren't paying attention, you metaphorically stubbed your toe. You picked up a book that was different from what you expected because you weren't paying attention. You weren't paying attention to the words on its cover and the words that clearly described its content. You weren't paying attention to your body and what you were actually in the mood for.
Perhaps you also weren't paying attention to your like allostatic load, your stress load, or your cognitive load, or you were just in some kind of way you weren't tracking yourself. And so because of that original disconnect, and without exercising discernment, because you didn't have that discernment, because you were disconnected from yourself, you therefore didn't get what you wanted. And when you didn't know what you wanted, and therefore didn't get what you wanted to punish me for it, just a little bit. You wanted to let me, but also everyone else know, you wanted it to be public, that you were displeased. And in doing so, that frames your displeasure as my fault, my shortcoming, and therefore my responsibility. Because like, honestly, you could have just thrown it into your like box of donations and said to yourself, I don't know what I was expecting, you know, but instead you wanted to let me and everyone else know that in some vague way, I broke some kind of promise to you, and therefore I deserve 3 stars for the contents of this book. And you know what that is, Emma? That's patriarchy. That's you going, I don't like this feeling I have right now. Maybe that feeling is like, I don't know, dissatisfaction. I don't like this feeling of dissatisfaction. And instead of just feeling it and letting that be a learning for yourself, like learning that you weren't paying attention, so you weren't clear on what you were consenting to, you weren't even clear what you wanted maybe, but it ended up not being your cup of tea. Instead of just having that feeling, you decided you needed to inflict your feeling on others. Specifically me, the faceless, bodiless, lifeless author with a feminine coded name, who doesn't exist for you beyond the product you purchased, who doesn't exist for you beyond what you feel owed for the time and money you put in, whatever that was. That is patriarchy. That is what patriarchy teaches all of us, especially men, but all of us, as we see here, that it's okay to do. It's okay to feel dissatisfied and make someone else pay for that. Because the patriarchal capitalist assertion is that other people owe you good feelings. Even if you were indiscriminate, you have no responsibility for that. Even if, because people are just like products and they owe you good feelings, especially because you threw money at them. So it doesn't matter that you didn't even really look at them when you threw the money at them. You didn't even know who or what you were getting because you were so disconnected from yourself. Under patriarchal capitalism, that's their problem, not yours, right? It's their problem that you were disconnected and had no discernment. Now, had you written an actual review that said something of substance with critique and you still decided to give it 3 stars, I could respect that. For example, this is one from Erica, who she gave it 4 stars. So Erica gave Spells for the Apocalypse 4 stars, and Erica wrote, "The witches are sending out spell books for the resistance, and I love to see it." So she recommends this other book, Intention Obsession, a practical and fun witchcraft companion with self-care rituals and DIY projects perfect for winter 2025. Embrace your inner witch and manifest your dreams. I'd never heard of that one, and wow, that's a long subtitle. Okay, so while that book was simple and cute, this is more like a 300 level class. You need to know what you're doing before diving in, both in terms of understanding the self and in terms of how to use things to affect other things, i.e. witchcraft. It wouldn't be a useful tool for me, but I love that this book exists, and I hope it's helpful to readers who can appreciate it. My one complaint across the board, and not just for this title, is that so far, all of the people I've seen who are in the activist witchcraft circles have been white women who look like influencers. Maybe they all come from Witch Talk and Spellstagram or whatever, but that's not necessarily what we need. Now is the time to amplify all the helpful voices, all the people with knowledge and wisdom who can guide their communities through the upheaval we've been dumped in.
That's the end of the review. Fair enough, Erica, and thanks for taking the time to read the book. And thank you so much for leaving a thoughtful review. And like, way to use your vote for what you believe in. I super respect that. And especially like, yeah, to advocate in review spaces and comment spaces to help make space and build capacity for a more accurately representative world. So like, yes, offer some pushback on white lady spirituality. I'm here for that. And now I'm tying this back to my super secret special announcement. Maybe after my super secret special big announcement is made public, I'm going to come back in, Erica, and respond to your comment. And hopefully I will have really, really great news for you. And I can't wait till that day. And thank you for expressing yourself, because in doing so, you validated feelings that I also share. And I'm sure millions of other people share for sure. So Emma, like honestly, Emma, fuck off with just punishing people just to make yourself feel better. Just, find other ways to self-regulate and to communicate your displeasure, okay? Like use your words, sister, because that's just being petty. And if you want to be petty, take that shit to your podcast like an adult instead of Goodreads. Goodreads actually does impact authors' livelihoods because it impacts their relationship to their editors and publishers and agents. Like, by the way. So don't do patriarchy's work for it, Emma. Okay, to be fair, I see from your reading list, Emma, that you've picked up a book on feminist language. And hopefully you will start to interrogate the ways that internalized patriarchy has us distance ourselves from other people and has us see them as objects to consume and to critique in relation to their utility and their ability to make us feel good about ourselves rather than as whole people to empathize with and contextualize. Patriarchy teaches us to consume people's work and ideas and art and self-expression like these creatives are just vending machines and like they didn't deliver the good experience we wanted. So we're like, thumbs down, on like hours and hours of their life force energy and in ways that have like a permanent footprint. Like for crying out loud, Emma. Oh, just like obviously you didn't think this through. And obviously you're not bringing a ton of critique to it. So I get it and I have compassion for that. But on the other hand, it's like it's 2025. Give your head a shake. Jeez. And to the thousands of people who gave Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, an Indigenous doctor, like a PhD New York Times bestseller, to the thousands who gave her a 3-star review for a gift book, and all the cockamamie bullshit reasons you wrote, like also give your fucking heads a shake. You're like the people who leave a review on a recipe for a roast chicken saying like, I didn't have chicken, so I used pork, and I didn't have chicken stock, so I used water, and I was in a hurry with guests coming over for a dinner party, so I increased the heat by 50 degrees to hurry it up. And this recipe was horrible, and I was so embarrassed as my guests took their bites, and this recipe sucks. It's really dry and flavorless. Like, oh my fucking God, people. If you want roast pork, don't use a roast chicken recipe. If you wanted something that was like a long, science-filled blah, 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 then why did you buy this tiny little gift book? If you can, like, especially, if you want roast pork, don't use a roast chicken recipe, and then especially don't go and review the chicken recipe that you didn't really want in the first place. What is wrong with you? Okay, honestly, I mean, I felt fine with a lower Goodreads average for spells because there's only like 5 reviews. And because Goodreads is notoriously harsh, especially like for reviews from people who didn't actually read the whole book. And I don't know if you know this, but like it's just like kind of gamifications. And it's just like any other social media system, right? There are lots of people on Goodreads who are more interested in appearing to be kind of like a high score reviewer, like that they've read a huge volume of titles and or they at least appear to have read them because they then go and review these titles. And even they maybe try to make their skim of a book look legit by leaving this review. And that makes them like a trusted reviewer because they've reviewed so much. And like the fact is, yes, for some people, there are perks to being a high score reader, let's call it, because publishers go on good reviews and they will reach out. They'll go onto something like Goodreads and they will reach out to people who do a lot of reviews and they will offer them like advanced reader copies or free books and stuff. And that kind of gives also, it's almost like having a blue check mark, right? It's like you have a bit more social capital in this essentially social media platform. So, so I don't pour over reviews because like all other forms of social media, the numbers just aren't real. But also many of you know this already, I haven't really promoted Spells for the Apocalypse much because, well, it's just because it's an experiment, really. So like with the Spirited Kitchen, I did a big, huge book launch campaign and had like multiple streams of marketing. And one of those streams is to ask on social media for people to review the book. But I didn't do that for Spells, not because I don't believe in the book, but this experiment I'm doing is kind of on like how much book promotion actually materially influences book sales. And honestly, the jury's still out on my experiment because Spells has only been out for less than a year, and I'm going to give it a year. So I'm not saying all this as like a big ask to review it because I don't want to cheat on my experiment. However, I mean, I will say, if you want to go on Goodreads and leave an actual honest review of Spells for the Apocalypse and bring like perhaps a more balanced perspective by adding more words, then like for sure, of course, I would totally appreciate that. But what is actually more important is this kind of idea of like, oh, this is what publishers are trying to work with. And this is what small presses, this is what authors, this is what editors and agents and book acquisition people, like this is what we're dealing with, is the enshittification of the internet. And it makes it really hard to like get it's hard to get your work published. It's also hard for us as readers to be able to trust what is good material, especially because AI has flooded Amazon in particular with just artificially created books lately. So like you'll see categories getting really, really big and inflated because it's all AI produced material. It's just a really difficult publishing landscape, a really difficult landscape for putting out work that you believe in and having it reach people, and a fucking mid in every kind of way 3-star review isn't helping. Okay, that's it. That's my rant. That may turn a lot of people off, but that's fine. I think the best messaging I can put out into the world is stuff that filters out the Emmas, okay? The people who are not a good fit. They're not paying attention to the things that I'm paying attention to. And I don't want people who, are so disconnected from themselves, from the world, from the systems of oppression and like tracking that they would be like, I don't know what I expected. Punish, downvote. I mean, it's so fucking Hunger Games. Anyway, if you don't enjoy Carmen swearing and calling out internalized patriarchy and telling a woman, a fellow woman, a stranger on the internet to fuck off, then yeah, this is not a good fit. And you're invited not to return. I've said it in other places, but I guess I maybe haven't said it lately, but like I'm a Scorpio sun and a Leo moon, and my Mercury is in Libra. So if I think something's unfair, I'm going to make a big fucking stink about it. And I'm going to be so petty about it. And I'm going to swear, and my words are going to cut deep because I'm ruled by Mars. And they're going to sting because I'm a Scorpio.
Best I can do is try to temper things with my Venus and Virgo, which I honestly truly did. Okay, this is me being agreeable. This is me being cooperative about it, Emma. Okay, this is me being as thoroughly comprehensively fair in my response to your extremely mid review. Anyway, hey, if you're still listening, because this kind of talk is your jam and you're interested in more like unlearning of all the ways that capitalist, imperialist, white supremacist patriarchy has shaped our thinking and feeling and acting, and makes us dehumanize each other, then you should consider joining us in the Numinous Network. But specifically, if you're a space holder of any kind, if you're a teacher of any kind, I really want you to look at my facilitation training. Marisa's done it. Lots of guides in the network have done it. Over 60, I guess I have to look at it again, probably 75 people in the last year have done it. It's very much the foundation of how we hold space in the Numinous Network, though in the network it's much gentler than what I just was doing with Emma. In the network, we take a very soft on individuals, tough on systems kind of approach. But I'm thin on bandwidth these days, so this was a teaching opportunity. Anyway, if you're a teacher, if this is your jam, I think you should look at doing facilitation training with me this summer. Registration for the summer cohort of my level 1 facilitation training closes on June 14th, 2025. So go to my website and learn more. Go to carmenspagnola.com, CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.